Yo, what's up?
Okay, so that was a quick introduction, but now we're going to get into comp sci. So it's been a while, so there's been a long break between my last video and now. That's because I've been enjoying my summer. Hopefully you have been too. So this summer I've actually been working a little bit on my website, just a little bit, some on robotics as you just saw. Anyways, we're going to get into comp sci, a comprehensive Java review, and this video we will start off with just some basic Java concepts, some syntax, some basic statements. We're going to create our first class file, our first method. We're going to get into some Boolean logic, the different data types, and then next episode, or whatever you want to call it, probably in the next video for this series that we're going to be doing for comp sci, is going to be, we're going to get into some object-oriented stuff. Because Java is in fact an object-oriented language, and I will explain more about what that means in the next video when I actually talk about objects. And so, this series is actually going to be something very special. Why? Well, because this video will not be put on my website at all. Sort of like with AP Lang, I don't think that's on my website at the moment. I'd have to recheck that, but yeah, and that's a lie. I do have a Lang. I do have, in fact, an AP Lang section on my website. The videos, my strategy videos for AP Lang are not on my website currently. They will probably be there when by the time this video is up, because I'm going to put them up there as soon as I'm finished. But again, as I was saying, not to digress from the point, but this will be the first series that will not make an appearance on my website. The comp sci series will not appear on my website. And why is that? Why won't it appear on my website? Because not everyone takes comp sci. That's the problem. Not everyone takes comp sci, but everyone takes, some sort of literature class. Everyone takes 9th Lit, 10th Lit. AP Lang, now we're stretching it. AP Physics 1, everyone takes physics, not AP Physics 1 or AP Physics C, which I'm taking next year, but everyone takes physics, everyone takes chem, everyone takes biology, everyone takes US history, everyone takes government, everyone takes world history, everyone takes those classes, right? Everyone takes math throughout their years of high school, but the problem is the fact that not everyone takes comp sci, so that's why this will not be on my website. Though again, not everyone takes AP Lang, and that's on my website anyways, but that's just because there's some vocab on there, which everyone needs to know some vocab, and I just like putting my vocab up on my website. Again, not to digress from the point, I just wanted to have this, this introduction, because it's been a while since I've last put up a video, and so now that I have digressed from the main point, let us get into the comprehensive Java review, starting right now. Comprehensive Java review will start off with some basics, as I said before. So, basic syntax. In Java, you have what's known as a statement. So a statement would be something that does it or performs a certain function. And so an example of a statement would say the int num is equal to 3. Now, what does this statement mean? This statement is saying that we have an integer, which I'll explain later, called num, and we are giving it a value of 3. And so this is a statement, it's performing a function, and that function is we're giving this variable a value of 3. And so because we have written a statement here, we have to always end our statements with a semicolon. Now, if we have something, say, like the header for a method, which I'll explain later as well, but say we have something like public int get num, which would just return the value of num, we would not put a semicolon at the end of the statement unless it were an abstract method, which in this case it's not. And we'll talk about abstract methods, way further on in the future, maybe like 3 or 4 videos in the series on. But instead, this would normally end with a opening curly brace, because this is a method, and then end like this. So you would not put a semicolon here, and you would not put a semicolon here, because this doesn't perform a function, it's just a title. Would you put a period at the end of, say, a title of a book? No, you don't put a period at the end of a title of a book, but you do put a period at the end of a sentence, such as an integer named num has a value of 3, period. You would put a period there. And so that's what the semicolon is. It's basically ending the statement. It's saying this statement is finalized. And if you eventually get into other programming languages in the future, then you would probably stumble across something called Python. Now, in Python, you have some basic Java syntax, but then the issue is the fact that your white space, the space between different things, is actually really important. And you don't end any of your statements with semicolons. Instead, it tells whether a statement has ended, whether you have pressed the enter, and whether you have pressed the enter key, and you have a certain number of spaces between the start of the line, we'll call this line 2, and the start of your statement. Now, that is not what Java is. Java is a lot easier to comprehend because you don't need that white space. You can write an entire code without any white space whatsoever. Here's an example. Any of that, important white space like enter keys. You don't need to press the enter key at all. So this is just one line. Boom. You don't see that? I will angle the phone upwards. There you go. You see? That's one line right there. Boom. I've written one line of code without pressing the enter key at all. So that was just some basic Java syntax. We're starting off slowly with our statements, and now we'll get into some more complex things over time. So another thing that we need to know about Java are the data types. And so there are 3 primitive data types, primitive meaning that they store a minimal amount of information, and in the computer's memory they are stored as is. There's nothing else. They are stored with the data that you assign to them in that memory location in your computer. And so that is important. And we'll get into more memory allocation stuff in the next video. So there are 3 types: int, double, and boolean. Now there's another one called char, but it's not a part of the AP subset. So you don't need to know what char is, whatsoever, okay? And then we'll get into just, a simple object. I know I said I'd talk more about objects next video, but this is just a simple object. It's called string, so it's a capital S, string. And so an int is just an integer. It's just negative to positive, just an integer, a whole number, yada yada yada, integer. Double takes up double the amount of memory space as an integer, but instead, so an example of an integer, say, would be 3. But in a double, that 3 would be, say, 3.0. Or you could assign it a value of 3.7, or 3.14159265358979323. Okay, so on and so forth. A double is basically just a more specific number, and so it can actually store decimal values. And so this is similar to what we call a float. This is the floating point value, and this is the integer value. So this is the integer value and the floating point value. The difference between a float and a double is that a double takes up twice the amount of memory, takes up twice the amount of memory space, and has twice the amount of data that you can store within a double. So we won't use float. We'll only use double because it's easier if we only talk about what, say, a double is versus what an integer is. A boolean is just very simple. It's just a true or false value. So if something is true, it returns a boolean value of true. If something is false, then it returns a boolean value of false. So say we have this condition, like 3 is greater than 4. This would return false. So this would return a boolean value of false, but 4 is greater than 3 would return a boolean value of true. Okay, simple stuff like that. Now a string, we're going to skip char, is just double quotes around some statement or whatever you want to put in there, like hello. That's a string. A char is, so a string you can break up into its specific letters, or we call these characters. And so that's what a char is, it's just a character. And so a string is bound by double quotes, a char is bound by single quotes. And so that's all you have to know about the data types and just about the primitive data types. And just a string, you have to know what a string is, because we're gonna make our first program using a string and using a simple, what we call a print line statement. A print line, just if you call something like, say, system.out.println, this is just saying that we are printing a new line, okay? And say, hello. This is just saying we're printing a new line with a string value of hello out, and we're printing that out to our system out, or what I like to call it the console. So if you have, say, a IDE software such as, say, Dr. Java, if you were to type out that statement in a class file, compile and run it, you would have something at the bottom of your page called a console, and at the bottom and in this console you would see something that looks like this. Hello, like that. And so that's just basic Java syntax for that, and that's actually pretty much just different things. And one other thing before I move on to our first class file and method is that Java is case sensitive. If you were to say have int val is equal to 3, and then int capital V val is equal to 3 is equal to 4, right? This is acceptable. Why is it acceptable? Because Java is case sensitive. There's a difference between lowercase val and uppercase val, and why is that? Well, because Java is case sensitive, as I've expressed before. And so that basically does it for some basic Java syntax. We'll get into more complex Java syntax, such as like how to write a method in about 2 videos from now, but right now we're just going to get into some basic Java concepts, and this is just some introductory Java syntax, okay? So now let's get into our first class file, okay? So our first class file, if you have an IDE program, if you have an IDE such as Dr. Java, please use that as we go along. If you don't have it, that's fine. Just take notes and go with the flow. So this is our first class file. We're calling it public class hello world. Okay? And so what is a class? A class is just the specific file in which your program is stored. So if we were to save this file to the computer, it would be called helloworld.java. And why is that? Well, because the class file is named hello world. And so helloworld.java is just what we are referring to as this class file. Okay? And so now we're going to say our main method. And so remember this. This is very important. Memorize this. Public static void main, and then string hard brackets arg. That is our main method. Remember this is very important. We'll get into more about what a main method is when we talk about driver classes in the future, but a main method is just telling your code, this is what I want the code to run. I want it to drive this, and we'll talk. And again, as I said, we'll get more into specifics when I talk about what driver classes are. And so just memorize this exact thing. Public static void main string args. And remember the hard brackets after the string. And we'll talk about what those hard brackets mean when we get into arrays. Okay? And then we're just going to write a simple statement. System Notice how the S in system is capitalized. It's because we're referring to it as the system, so it's capitalized because the system is in fact an object, but don't worry about that. System out dot print line hello world exclamation point. Okay. And there you go. Our first class file, hello world. Pretty simple, right? Just one line of code. Now I say one line of code, but I really mean one statement of code because there's only one statement with a semicolon, as you can see. So this would just, in your console, it would just print hello world. There you go, to a new line. And when I say new line, I mean like, if you were to just do print, what this would do is it would just print hello world, but then it wouldn't put a space, and so the next time you do a print, it wouldn't press the enter key. And so if you were to do another print statement like this after that, you would get something like hello world, hello world. See how there's no enter space between these? But if I put line, then in your console, what happens is it looks like this if I print it out twice. Boom. And we'll talk more about that when I get into ASCII stuff, but print is just, so print line is basically just a print statement, except there's a special character after that called new line that looks like this. So this is a new line character. It's basically just the enter. It's basically just when you press enter on the keyboard, this is the ASCII character that represents that. It's just a simple way of representing the enter key in Java. And so your computer reads this as the same value that it gives your enter key. And so this is basically just the same thing as enter, which tells your computer to move on to the next line of its memory or whatever is going on in this code, such as like printing to a new line. And that's pretty much it. So that's our first class file, our first method, and some basic Java syntax, just introductory syntax, of course. And so our class file is the name of the file, the document, and the method is just where the code is performed. Okay, a method is where the code is run and performed. It's where all the functions are stored, and the class file is where all the methods are stored. So there are the statements that perform the function. There are the methods that hold those statements and run those statements in sequence, and then there are the class files that run the methods and the methods in sequence. Okay. And so Java is in fact a sequential language. It runs everything in order like this in what we call a control flow, and we'll talk more about how to manipulate that control flow in later videos. And so that's it for this video, just our starting video for Comp Sci. Hopefully I get around to making more videos, and yeah, that's it.